What's going on, coaches? Welcome to today's Vodcast. Today we have the offensive line coach from Grayson High School in Georgia, Coach Jake Timmerman. Grayson are the two-time state champs in the 7A competition down in Georgia, which makes him quite a perennial powerhouse, big-time program. So as an offensive lineman from back in the day, I'm really looking forward to hearing Coach Timmerman discuss the O-line development, skill, technique, play. I just to hear his thoughts on offensive linemen and offensive line play. Coach is quite active on social media. Open book for anyone wanting to know more about O-line work or offensive line or offense. Feel free to reach out to him on Twitter at Coach_Timmerman. The links will be provided in the description below. So I'll stop talking. We'll get Coach on. And welcome.
I appreciate you having me on, Coach. Always good to talk some ball.
No, that's good. So hopefully everything's going well with the current situation.
Yeah. I know we talked a little bit about it before everything, but just trying to make the best of it. We are meeting with our players twice a week via Zoom. We meet with our varsity guys, and then we also recently started meeting with some of our rising ninth graders because they would have normally been with us for spring training.
Right.
So we've been trying to do that, a mix of our base install, what we put in the spring, and obviously now kind of getting into the summer, and just checking up on them on a personal level. Obviously this is a lot of stuff to deal with for the kids, who are used to being in school and seeing their friends and everything like that, and used to being around us. So it's just nice to kind of be able to take some time to hang out for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we are still having to take care of the business side of things with football, and so we've done some install stuff, and more recently, a lot of our meetings have been, a little more engaged. Us, pulling up some screenshots or some video for the kids, and they identify the defense, and we give them a play, and they kind of talk us through what the concept is and their rules and so on and so forth.
Right.
Just to try to keep everybody sharp. So that's kind of what we've been doing as far as football goes, because that's really about all we can do at this point. We're still kind of waiting on word to see where we go now that summer's beginning.
Right. And so you guys have no word on when the season will start, or it starts as normal until you hear otherwise.
We have no idea. There's people talking about we start in June. There's people talking about we start in July. There's people talking about we're not even going to go back to school until after Labor Day. And people talking about we're only going to play like half a season and only play our region games. Because I don't know how much you know about like the Georgia playoffs or whatever, but essentially like you play a non-region schedule, and as far as the playoffs go, those games technically don't matter.
Right.
So then you play your region games, and your region seeding depends on, if you get in the playoffs and kind of what position you enter in. So there's talk about like just dropping the non-region games, which are usually at the first half of the season. And then, so maybe playing like a 5-game schedule and then doing the playoffs starting in like September or something like that. Right. But we have no official word. So it's all up in the air right now.
Fun. That's always fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get you to basically introduce yourself. Tell us how you came to be at Grayson, and it's such a big time program that gets to play on ESPN, and even gets their games televised down here. So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. So my name is Jake Timmerman. Like I said, I am right now one of the 2 offensive line coaches we have at Grayson High School. Grayson's a big time program. This is actually, I'm fortunate enough. This is actually my second stop at what I would consider a big time program. I was previously at Northside High School in Warner Robins, Georgia, which is like right around the middle of the state. Northside is one of the winningest programs in all of Georgia high school football. They've won 3 state championships. I was lucky enough to be part of one of those in 2014. That was actually my first year coaching, so that was really cool to come in. And I went to private school my whole life down in South Georgia. Right. And so, we had 300 kids in the whole school, and 35 players on the team. And so then I graduate college, and private school jobs usually don't come with like insurance and all that stuff. So like really the good jobs are public school jobs, you know? So that was my first real experience with public school, period, was my getting my first job out of college and everything. So I got fortunate enough to jump on there. I was the 9th grade offensive line coach. I got hired on by our head coach, Kevin Kinsler, and our principal, Greg Peavy, who were awesome to work with, to give me an opportunity to come to a big time program like that. Like I said, 2014 was my first year. I was the 9th grade offensive line coach. So my role was pretty limited. You know, I don't take like a whole bunch of credit for that state championship or anything, but I was there at least. And I do have a ring, which is cool. But that was a great experience for me to kind of get my feet wet, I guess. Like I said, at a program that does it right, that knows how to organize, you know, a practice, that knows how to put together, you know, a proper off season and stuff like that. And so that was cool. So I did that for 2 years. I was the 9th grade O-line coach for 2 years. And like I said, that was a really positive experience for just learning how to be a coach. And, you know, I've changed a lot since that first year, I believe. That first year I was really hot-headed. I was screaming and yelling and all kinds of different things. And, you know, I never cussed at the kids or anything. But I was pretty hot-headed, and I'm a lot more laid back now, because I learned that, you know, there are more effective ways than, you know, to be yelling all the time. Now, there are obviously still times where you kind of got to get on them, you know, pick up the intensity level, but typically now it's more of an effort thing. You know, I try not to be somebody who's going to yell at a kid for improper technique or something like that, because I'm pretty sure they're not doing the wrong technique on purpose.
Yep.
So, you know, that was cool. I got to kind of, you know, grow my coaching style, sort of find out what kind of coach I wanted to be, those kind of first 2 years. And then my 3rd year at Northside, I got bumped up to coach the varsity offensive line. Did that for the 2016 season and the 2017 season. 2018 was my 5th and final season at Northside. I went back down to the 9th grade level to be the offensive coordinator for the 9th grade team, because that's something, you know, that I want to do at some point later on. And I figured it was a good opportunity to get some play calling experience and some experience organizing a practice and being in charge of what we do at practice and stuff like that. And so that was cool. And in 2019, I got the opportunity to come here at Grayson. I had a colleague of mine, Adam Carter. He was the defensive coordinator at Valdosta High School, which is one of the, you know, it's the winningest high school program in America. And they were in our region while I was at Northside, and so we had kind of become familiar with each other's work and everything. And he had a head coaching job in the 2018 season, and he got tapped to be the head coach at Grayson for 2019. And I just happened to be at a clinic with him in February of 2019. And when I got the word, you know, when I got news of it, I sent him a text to say congratulations to everything. You know, if you need an O-line guy, you know, hit me up or whatever. And so we were able to make something work because I knew Grayson's reputation. I was looking to kind of move to the Atlanta area anyway, just to kind of a change of scenery and get up that way. And Grayson is a big time powerhouse school. There weren't many programs that I could go to that were on the same level as Northside, but Grayson was one of them. So I took the opportunity. Got there in May. Was still living in Warner Robins while we were trying to do spring football. And so I would drive up on like a Monday, and we have practice, and then I'd stay at Coach Carter's house, and then I'd go up to the school the next day and hang out, and then we'd have practice Tuesday, and then I'd have to go back to Warner Robins because I was using my personal days. Right. And so I'd have to go back down there and finish teaching stuff because I was still under contract. So that was a fun spring, but we got through it. We did it somehow. And this past season, 2019 season, we had a lot of guys who didn't necessarily have a ton of experience in the previous 2 years. But I was really proud of how they played, especially on our offensive line level. I think 4 of the 7 guys that we rotated throughout the year on offensive line actually were playing defensive line when spring ball started. So that's a credit, you know, not to me or anything of that sort. It's a credit to the kids and how hard they worked and how much they bought in, which is what you got to have. So, obviously this spring we were hoping, hey, we'll all be together. We'll have an actual real spring football this year. But 2020 has been crazy so far. So, right now we're just kind of seeing how we can best prepare for a start date that we don't know when it's going to be. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I guess as far as, scheme wise, I like to spread it out. I like the spread offense. I guess I'm kind of twofold. If I'm going to be a running team, I like wide zone. That's my go-to scheme. I love that scheme. But if not, then I like the idea of throwing the ball around. When I was at Northside, Jake Fromm, who was a quarterback at UGA for the past few years, he was actually at Houston County High School, which is the another high school in our district. So we played them every year I was at Northside. Right. And so I got to watch him. Northside's pretty good on defense, but I got to watch him basically carve us up for 3 years. And so that kind of firsthand experience really made me fall in love with, spread offense and throwing the ball around a lot, watching him firsthand in person. So that's kind of where I stand on X's and O's. As far as offensive line training, and we can kind of get into more of this, I really take a lot of influence from guys like LaCharles Bentley and offensive line performance and the stuff they do there. Alice Gibbs, like I mentioned, I'm a big wide zone guy. Sam Pittman, who was the UGA offensive line coach for a number of years and now is the head coach at Arkansas. Herb Hand, who was the offensive line coach at Auburn and is now at Texas. Been able to talk with him on a few occasions. He's a guy that'll help you out. And so, and a ton of guys in high school. You mentioned Twitter and stuff like that. Twitter has been huge for, I think, us as coaches to, grow and share ideas and stuff like that. Maybe get out of our comfort zone a little bit and learn some new things.
Yeah, absolutely. Twitter's great. It's one of the easiest ways for us down here to learn. We don't get the luxury of the clinic talks and everything like that. So I think while this current situation has been bad for 2020, all the influx of online content has been really good for coaches in general and definitely coaches abroad. Really opens the doors to learn more for coaches who would otherwise be probably too busy to put in such amount of work and time. So it helps. And Twitter's a great vehicle for that. So you said you're a wide zone advocate.
Man.
It seems to be the flavor at the moment. That combined with duo, it seems to be the big thing going around on Twitter and the internet.
People are finally catching on.
It seems like a rather straight, easy play, but I know it's not. It's a bit more
easy to learn, difficult to master.
Yeah, right. What would you say would be the hardest thing for an offensive lineman learning it for the first time? Because your rules are relatively straight, easy, right? You've got your play side gap, but then you've got everything that flows on from that. So what would you say would be the hardest part?
I would say, to a degree, you just have to have a feel for it. Mm-hmm. Because I can teach you, hey, we start with like covered uncovered principles and stuff. And, if nobody comes to you while you're on your track, you work up. If there's somebody there, you want to try to cover them up. But, as the bullets are flying, a lot of times there's that gray area where, do I cover the guy up? Do I try to knock him off? Do I keep climbing? And so I think it's just that repetition. It takes 1,000 reps at it just to not look like crap. When we first installed the play last spring, at first we couldn't get our guys to run at all. A lot of them just kind of wanted to side shuffle. And then after about a month of drilling in their heads and working angles and stuff like that, they were basically, at that point, they were running too much. And they were basically going flat down the line and not working up, right? And not covering up and not working up. And so it took about another 2 to 3 months where we found that happy middle ground. And like I said, that just comes from reps and reps and reps and reps, because I can give you, rules and tell you, hey, after 3 steps, if nobody shows up, climb. But, there's no offensive lineman in the world that once the play starts goes 1, 2, 3 steps. Okay, coach said climb now. And so it takes a million reps at it to work your zone combos, when we go to install it and the way we start to teach it is we'll start, on an individual level working. This is what a reach block is.
Yep.
This is what a reach block feels like. And I don't like to use pads. I like to have the kids just, this is what it feels like to have your hand on somebody's breastplate on shoulder pads. This is what it feels like to have your hand, in the armpit of the shoulder pads or whatever. Now we'll sometimes use like the med balls and stuff. You may have seen people like holding the med balls. We're starting to teach like, to shoot your hands and stuff like that. But when we're actually doing like the football contact stuff, I like to keep the pads, the shoulder pads as the point of contact. Now, with that in mind, we're not, banging into each other, full speed or anything like that. But I like for them to feel what that contact feels like. And so we'll start kind of on an individual level. Like I said, this is what a reach block feels like. Yep. This is how you reach a guy who's head up on you. This is how you reach a guy who's on your outside shoulder. This is how you try to reach a guy who's, a little bit wider than that. And then we'll start to work to, okay, well, what do you do if you can't reach? What if they're playing contain and they're moving with you and they stick in their gap? Okay, well, this is what it feels like to torque and pry, what we call it torque and pry, to pry the hole open and run them that way, right? Because the play can what we call bounce, bang, or bend. It can go outside, it can cut in B gap or back down what really is A gap moving forward. And so we work on that. Once we've done that, we'll introduce a second guy and say, okay, now there's 2 offensive linemen and now there's a defensive lineman and a linebacker.
Yep.
Okay, and so we work 2-man combos where either they, the inside guy, whether it's a guard and a tackle or a center and guard, whatever it is, where the inside guy either has to reach the defensive lineman or knock him off or climb. We do that. Then we introduce a 3-man combo where now there's 3 offensive linemen and maybe there's 3 defenders, right? And maybe one guy's working a backside cutoff and the other 2 are working their combo. So we just try to put the building blocks there because it's something, like I said, that just takes a bunch of reps. Not that other schemes don't. It's just something I think that because there's a lot of moving parts.
Yep.
I don't think anybody would disagree that there's more movement in wide zone than something like power or counter or something like that. And so to be able to adjust on the fly and kind of get a feel for when do I do this, when do I do that, I think is the hardest part in my very long-winded answer.
No, that's great. So when you're running wide zone, are you one of those coaches who believes it needs to be tight end, fullback, or at least one of them, or can it be done out of 10?
I don't have a problem running it out of 10, but I feel like to be, I guess, to use the word safe, if you're going to run it out of 10, it's usually best to an open B gap, just because from what I've seen and kind of my experience, and at least with high school guys, you can go find tape of NFL teams running it to a 3 and a 5, or NFL guys, whatever. But the most effective way I've seen a lot of teams give wide zone trouble is if you're running it out of 10 personnel to a 3 and a 5, and the 3 spikes A gap and the 5 spikes B gap, and the mic wraps over top, and nobody ever gets off to the mic, and there he is. Right. So yeah, you can run it out of 10, no doubt. A ton of teams do it. Oregon had a ton of success running it out of 10 and stuff like that. I like having a tight end down. I like running it with a tight end, whether that's to the tight end or weak. Like the Los Angeles Rams ran a bunch of wide zone week a couple years ago. We ran it a lot out of, I guess what you would call a 20 personnel set with like an H back or like a sniffer. He's kind of like, we would line him up in different spots sometimes, but he's kind of basically right outside the tackle. And so he's there to basically act sort of as that lead blocker, sometimes to help seal the edge. My favorite formation to run it out of, just schematically, is with the H back right beside the quarterback and the tailback and pistol. Okay. I do think the play is much better out of pistol. Now, like I said, there are teams that run it effectively out of sidecar, no doubt. Again, Oregon is another example. But I think for your average run-of-the-mill high school team, it's just so much more effective out of pistol. It's more downhill in nature. And one of the things that Alex Gibbs talks about is, obviously Gibbs back in the 90s and early 2000s stuff, they're running it primarily from under center.
Yep.
And one of the things he talks about is to be successful in the play, a lot of times you want your back and your center right behind each other as the play is moving. So like you go and watch a lot of the plays, a lot of times the back and the center are right behind each other. And then that's how the running back kind of knows whether to keep going or to cut it back.
Right.
So I like it best with the H-back right beside the quarterback, tailback in the pistol, and the H is sort of basically he's a lead blocker, but he's kind of seeking. Right, he's kind of reading the play out just like the tailback would. And so if the offense, if the play side offensive linemen get those guys reached and there's an edge right there, he'll lead off that edge and help secure that. But if those defensive linemen or whatever, they shoot outside and they try to run and hold their gap, then the H will bend it back just like the back would because he's further off the line of scrimmage, so he can actually read it and see it.
Okay.
So that's App State did that a lot. Louisville does that a lot with Coach Ledford there. So that's a really good set to run it out of.
Right. Interesting. What are you guys doing on the backside? Is it just cut off, or do you have specific rules?
Yeah, you're trying to cut them off.
Yeah.
We tell them, as kind of a general concept, we want the front side. We want to stretch the front side, and we want to cut off the backside.
Right.
All right. And so, because, unless you just got a back that can really just outrun everybody on the defense, which we did have actually. But if you just take your average run-of-the-mill running back who's maybe not faster than everybody on the defense, a lot of the big plays come when the back busts it down the pipe and not necessarily tries to, circle the whole defense. You get those front side guys stretched out. And you get the backside guys cut off, and there's that lane right there in the middle. So we tell our guys on the backside, cut them off.
Right. Do you think that kind of play is something that can be run for coaches with limited amount of time? Thinking more around down here and across the globe, it's more like semi-pro ball over there, right? Like we get 2 practices. For maybe 2 hours each, and we're sort of running around with very limited time. Given the high rep nature, do you think it could be effective, or does it need more time?
If it's your only thing, it's got to be. I tell people all the time, if you're going to run wide zone, you got to marry it. You can't date wide zone. Okay, you can't go see wide zone on the weekends. You've got to marry it, and so I think it's something that. If you really commit to it and you run wide zone as your number one run scheme and you maybe have something else like inside zone or duo to complement it, then yeah, probably so. But you can't be trying to run wide zone and inside zone and power and counter and buck sweep and, and then do all this other stuff and have 5 different pass protections and stuff like that, especially if your resources are limited. Like we pretty much, we ran wide zone, we ran inside zone lock, we ran counter and dart. Those were really our 4 main run schemes. And then we had 3 or 4 pass protections. And so we tried to keep it real simple for our guys. So if you're going to run it, I would say marry it, and it needs to be probably your number 1, number 2 at the lowest in terms of like it's your priority.
Yeah. Okay. And what are you as an offensive line coach looking for in your players to fit that scheme? What are the traits?
You need guys who can move. You need guys who can move. I think one of the things that made us successful last year was we didn't have any big bruisers up front. We had one offensive lineman who was over 250 pounds. And at the 7A level in Georgia, that's a relatively small offensive line. But we had guys who were smart, especially 3 of our guys who in particular were really smart. They understood what we were trying to accomplish, and they could move. And so that helped us a lot. That's another good thing I like about it is you don't have to have these big bruisers up there. You don't have to have these 300-pound Division I kids up there to run the play. We had a 200-pound guard, and we averaged over 8 yards a carry on wide zone. Now, part of that is also because we had 2 Division I caliber running backs in our backfield. One of them submitted to Clemson, and so did they make us right? A lot of times, Yeah, but at the same time, it's also a credit to our guys up front, and it's a credit to the scheme that you don't have to have these big bruisers up there who bench 500 pounds or whatever. If they're smart and they understand what we're trying to accomplish, and they'll move and they'll work, then the play can definitely be successful.
Okay. What would you think is sort of the front or the box that gives it the hardest? Is the hardest to run it against, I guess.
It it kind of depends on what you want to do offensively. Like I said, if you're a 10 personnel team and you constantly have to run it at a 3 and a 5, that can usually be difficult. But I think that's another thing about wide zone that I love so much is I don't think there's necessarily one particular front that when I'm scouting on the weekends or maybe ahead for future opponents, there's not really a front that makes me go, crap.
Right.
Unless it's just they put 9 people in the box and you got to figure out how to block 9 people.
Yes.
But in terms of an alignment perspective, there's not really anything that gives me a headache.
Right.
Because I think the scheme is so adaptable and the rules are simple to, like I said, simple to understand, difficult to master. But the nature of the play is pretty adaptable on the fly. Now, what we started seeing was, like I said, we played a lot with an H-back, kind of a 20 personnel set, 3 receivers and stuff like that. But what we found was that a lot of teams, because we began to be so successful running our wide zone to the H-back, especially in the kind of the first half or the middle of the season, towards the second half of the season, a lot of teams began overplaying our H. Like I'm talking about, now some of these teams weren't necessarily very good, so they probably weren't lined up right. But you would see 6 people on one side of the center and 2 people on the other side. And so that gave us an opportunity. Now, obviously, that's not a good look to run the play into because they got 6 people on one side of the ball. But what we were able to do with that is come back the other way with GH counter. We pull the guard and kick the in and then bring the H back across the opposite side of the formation as a lead blocker. So in the second half of the season, counter really became a good counter or complement to our wide zone play.
Lovely. You sort of answered my next question. It was going to be what would you run to complement it? Do you guys run much of the boot and waggle that you see like Coach Kadudi run on YouTube all the time?
Yeah, boot was a big part of our passing game. If we felt like that end wasn't respecting the quarterback and he's trying to chase that thing down, or we felt like, man, that safety is coming down hard and run support, we'll try to boot and hit the deep post behind them, stuff like that, or guys, maybe guys at linebacker depth getting their eyes in the backfield, we'll run it with a tight end and an H or something like that, or we'll bring a slot receiver over on a crossing route where those linebackers would be. So the boot game was real good for us this past year.
Love it. Scenario: it's 4th and goal, 6 yards out.
Right.
What are you running? Can't run wide zone though, because obviously that seems to be like the answer you would have given.
Well, my answer is it depends on who my best players are.
Let's say your team from last season.
Our team from last season. Yep. It's 4th and goal from the 6-yard line. If I can't run a wide zone, I'm probably going to try to throw the ball to one of our receivers, number 3, Jaden. And he was pretty good. So if I can get the ball to him in some way, because for me, one of the things that sticks with me is try to think players, not plays. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't get into a lot of the chalk war stuff on Twitter per se. I love watching that stuff and I love learning and I think it's good stuff. But for me, I tend to think players, not plays. So it all depends on who my best players are. I'm going to get them the ball some way, somehow. You can love power all you want. You can love wide zone all you want. But if you, for whatever reason, don't have particular players to execute that scheme, or it doesn't get the ball to your best player, then you probably need to find something else to do. So that's kind of would be my answer, is to get the ball to your best player. But in terms of a scheme, I like a lot of the rub concepts are good. If you can get one guy coming on a slant, another guy coming off underneath him, and I know a lot of guys have variations of those, or maybe some type of, I know a lot of guys do kind of they'll do the sprint out and then maybe try to sneak somebody back going across, maybe try to get them lost in the trash and stuff like that. So those are usually good. A lot of times, teams go into man defense down in the red zone and stuff and try to, pack that box a little bit. So any type of maybe where you can get some kind of, mesh or crossing routes or a rub, something like that is, try to get somebody free is usually a go-to for sure down there.
Cool. And what would you give as a fairly young offensive line coach in the grand scheme of through what would be some words of wisdom or advice you would give to up and coming offensive line coaches, through what you've learned?
Build a relationship with your players, man. That is the most important thing you can do. Like, none of this scheme crap matters if you don't have a relationship with your kids. Like, it doesn't matter how smart we are as coaches. It doesn't matter how many podcasts on power or wide zone or air raid we watch. None of that crap matters if you don't have a relationship with your kids. If you have a relationship with your kids, then they will work their butts off for you. We were successful up front last year as an offensive line for two main reasons, I feel like. One, because we had really, really good running backs, which helps.
Yes.
And two, I feel like myself and Coach Hill, who was our other offensive line coach, I feel like we built great relationships with our players, and we had a great culture as an offensive line unit. And our kids worked their butts off. I'm no genius coach. I'm no guru or anything like that. But I do feel like that I'm good at building relationships with kids. And then when you do that, they'll work their butts off. And that's what matters, because when Friday night comes around, I'm up in the booth. I don't get to play. I can't, show them, we got like the iPads or whatever with instant replay or stuff or whatever, but I can't pause the game and walk out there and be like, all right, let's rep it again. They've got to adapt. And so it's, build relationship with your kids, find out what they do best, find out what motivates them. Some kids do respond to getting their butt chewed out in front of everybody or whatever. Some kids don't. I did not like that. I did not ever respond well to getting my butt chewed out in front of everybody, because I was trying really hard. And so I kind of, as a player, I felt a lot of times insulted, or embarrassed to a degree whenever I got called out in front of everybody. And so you have to figure out your players, know what motivates them, know how to build a culture as an offensive line guy. Some of those, I don't want to call them gimmicks or whatever, but some of those, things that some of the guys, some of the coaches out there do, some of it works, for their group, but it may not work for another group. There's a O-line coach here in Georgia. Every time his kids get a pancake block, and they come off the field, he gives them like a shot of syrup. He carries a syrup bottle on the sideline. And some people may think that's silly, and it may be, but if that works for his kids, it helps build a relationship with his kids, then more power to him, right? As long as you're not, crossing any type of line or whatever, do what works for your kids, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have got to play.
Right. All right. Well, thanks again for your time. It was great talking O-line play in the wide zone and the wide zone play itself. So again, thank you.
Appreciate you having me on. It's always good to talk some ball.
Brilliant. It is always fun. For those watching, if you like talking football and hearing coaches talk ball, give this channel a like, subscribe, share it, comment. The more people getting involved, the better the content will be.